Hey there, welcome to First Look. Thank you for being here this time as we keep on moving forward in June. And now you get to see live right in front of you someone who is doing the prep work for Vacation Bible School, which means half my brain is in front of you and half my brain is trying to figure out how do I make a game out of manna, and how do I how do I do crafts around the feeding of the 5,000 and things like that. So my brain's in two different places. So welcome to the ride. I like Vacation Bible School a lot. It does kind of take up the whole of you for a bit, but it's one of the things that when you're in the middle of it is still one of my favorite things. So I'm glad I get a chance to be the staff member who's on top of that. In addition to that, we also have Youth Sunday, which is happening this week, and that for us means really honoring and caring for and acknowledging the youth in our congregation. And all of them this time are members. So all the youth that you'll see or that we'll recognize in the service are all members of the church. And so I'm very pleased to be able to have them be a part of things in the way that they can be and they want to be, because they're a big part of the way that I see my call here at Northmont, and I know that we all kind of see our place in the church. And the passage that we have for this particular Sunday, I think, is a good one for this particular week. So I'm hoping that you can kind of see the parallels, but it's also a passage that I think is very relevant to all of us. So this is Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 until 10, verse 8. So I'll kind of read through it a little bit as we go, but what I'm hoping is that you can kind of look at it through the eyes of youth and children, but that also you start to think about your own journey of faith and how these words apply. So the first segment of it is talking about the Lord of the harvest. So it starts off, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. I want to pause there. One of the things that you're going to see throughout this is that there is a combination. There's always a combination of the message of the gospel, but then also the actions and mission of the gospel. And that's the part that I'll be coming back to time and time again, is that reality. When he saw the crowds, he was moved with compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his people, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest." So it's going to pivot into some of the workers element there. But I think one of the things that we lead with in this text is the fact that it says, Jesus had compassion on them. And compassion is a word that you probably hear me say a lot in prayers and any of the liturgy that I write. I use that word a lot because it's sort of the accompaniment to empathy, and it's love in action is compassion and empathy. And I think that one of the elements of faith that we far too often, I think, sometimes leave behind is how the way we think about God, our theology for God, has to start and finish in compassion. And I think that gets lost because we so often want to be right. We so often want to feel justified in our thoughts and feelings, and whether it's our social leanings or political leanings, or just the way that we kind of see the world, or the observations that we make about the world today, or how children live, or whatever. There's a reminder for me that the way that compassion kind of plays into that is that there's always been and always will be a kind of critique of anyone who was raised and grew up, raised children in a certain era, and now is sort of looking back on that in hindsight, of that kind of back in my day mentality. I do it with lots of different types of things. But what I find is I have to remember that we have been doing that forever. Every generation, 20th century, 19th century, all the way back to Jesus, was always looking at the generation that was in front of them and saying, there's something about this current group of younger people who haven't figured it out yet. And we know that because Jesus often talked about the perils of the generation that he was in, the evils of that generation, the way that generation did not meet the compassionate standards that they should have. And I think that's one of the elements of just being a human being that's a really important piece of our faith, because we tend to view the world as, well, somehow I figured it out, somehow I did fine, somehow I know what I'm doing, but those people over there don't know what they're doing. Those people over there are an issue. And I think that Jesus sort of names that, right? He names the fact that, we do look out in the world and see issues. That's not new, but that's true. But Jesus was also there for that generation and beyond. And I think that's, that Jesus looks out and sees them with compassion, that sees the world as one that is worth being in, sees the world that is worth saving, sees the world that is worth his time and effort and love. And so when we look out into the world and we see it, if we aren't starting with and ending with compassion, with the way we think about, again, any social decision, any political decision, any family decision that we make, if we're not leading with, what do I think is the most compassionate way of proceeding from here, then I think we've missed the mark. I think that we've come up short. And I think that we need to reimagine the purpose of our theology, the purpose of our worship, of our interactions with our faith. So Jesus talks about a need for, they're like sheep without shepherds. And that analogy we have done in several different ways, and so I don't think I have to really go through it with you in detail. But I think that one of the things that this reminds me of is, again, that the shepherding element of it is, there's a relational piece to that a shepherd would have to know the traits of sheep and vice versa. And several places where Jesus is described as shepherd and us as sheep. In all those places, there's a relational aspect, right? It's not just transactional. It's not just I do this for you, and so you do this back for me. There's a knowledge of that's reciprocal, and that's another one of the elements I think of faith that we tend to very quickly put down, because we think in transactional terms. Well, if I do this sin, or if I think this thing, or if I act in this way, then I will get this. Like a balanced equation. When in reality, relationships are never balanced, never completely balanced. It's always someone giving of themselves in whatever capacity they can handle in the moment, and then someone else pouring back into them in whatever ways they can handle. And that's never an equal stream. And it's not with God either. It's as we understand, God is one with unlimited capacity. And so any response that we give, compassionate or otherwise, is not going to balance that equation. And so we don't have to live like somehow we are ever going to gain something that we quote unquote deserve, because that's not the way it's set up. And so we don't pour ourselves into the world or into other people with the expectation that somehow that is going to be a balanced equation either. There are some times when people are able to give back to us, but we don't do it for that reason. And again, that compassion slips into the way that we understand social structures and economic structures and political structures, that the way that we think through those things also shouldn't be something that has some kind of equal equation to it. That we should live our lives in such a way and structure the world around us in such a way where that the quality of getting something back isn't always the reason that we do it, but because it's the right thing to do, because it's the caring thing to do. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to set up, because as we go from this chapter into the next one, there's the calling of the disciples. So we get to that part in the first couple of verses of chapter 10, and let's see, the 12 apostles. So right here, Jesus calls, they name the 12 apostles, calling his 12 disciples to him. Jesus gave them authority over unclean spirits so that they could drive them out and heal every disease and sickness. Again, there's not just a empowerment for passing along the gospel or for prayer, but in addition to that, there's also something that is about making active, healing, holistic change for those around them. The two things go hand in hand. And so he names the people who are going to do this action. Let's see. So Simon he called Peter, Andrew, James the son of Zebedee, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew the tax collector, Simon the zealot, Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus. So it kind of, this list of the 12 names not only the people, but also the role that they play in the world, or the role that they play as disciples. Matthew is a tax collector, and the other Simon is a zealot, and then Judas is the one who betrays Jesus. So who they are is also named. So Jesus does all of this to name the importance of compassion and healing actions, right? The disciples are given the capacity to heal. Jesus, leading up to calling the disciples, is in the act of healing. And so then the 12 that he calls is also a way of healing, calling people in this situation that you wouldn't necessarily predict or assume. People who have no great authority in society, who have no great social standing or political standing, those who aren't religiously trained. It calls fishermen, people from Galilee, people from nowhere, and then a tax collector, a zealot, who neither of which could be any more different, on different ends of the social spectrum, and then Judas, who he knew was going to eventually betray him. All of these people are there doing the work of healing. Again, not just regurgitating some ethos of Jesus, but being those who actively help to heal the people around them. Which is a good reminder for us of not only the compassion that Jesus shows just in the act of healing, but the compassion that we are called to show as well. The variety of people that is always going to include the things that need healing, right? What needed healing for a tax collector? What needed healing for a zealot? What needed healing for a man who was eventually willing to betray Jesus? So you see that not only in what they do, but also in who they are. So then the final piece of the passage, at least let's see here, which kind of sets up the beginning of their ministry in verses 5 through 8. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: do not go out onto the road of the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Even though, of course, we know that eventually they would do that. He's saying this is where we're starting. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. And as you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is near. And then heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, drive out demons. Freely you have received, and so freely you give. So, I think that one of the things that I try to come back to whenever I'm looking at this particular passage is the way that Jesus sees the people that he's there to serve. And again, depending on the situation, depending on the part of the gospel we're reading, his focus is on one group or another. So here in this 9th and 10th chapter of Matthew, his focus is on the people of Israel. And he's saying, look, you have enough to do with the people around you without worrying about the Gentiles or without worrying about Samaritans or any of those groups. What I need you to do from the beginning is to spend your time in your own backyard. Not only introducing a sense of urgency to them, but also an opportunity for reconciliation and wholeness. And again, I think that we assume too often that if we're in church, then we've at least gotten to a place where we're okay and we need to go out to help other people either to receive the same thing that we have received, etc. And that is true. And we know it's true because we recognize the fact that Jesus had a calling, not only to the ends of the earth, but it included people of other nationalities and people of other ethnic groups. But we also recognize the fact that where he needed his disciples to start were with the people that they knew, that they were comfortable with, that they understood. And Jesus is always kind of going back and forth between those groups and doing something that I think people are surprised about, regardless of who he's focused on. When he's focused on the people of Israel, the people are surprised because so often they assume that they are the people who already know God and already know what they're doing and already have it right. And Jesus' stories and parables and interactions that he has are almost always reminding people that they have a lot to learn. You know, he goes to his hometown of Nazareth, and he's almost driven out of town because he tells the people basically that you are the unrighteous. You are the people who need to change the way you understand the world or the people. You know that your need for God, like it's you. It's not other people. Like you're not it yet. And they are incensed by that. So you have that kind of piece of it. And then the other element, I guess, is when he includes other people. When he says, "Okay, well now we need to love and receive and invite these other folks, Gentiles and Samaritans, and people from other nations." Then they're again kind of incensed. I think because those who are the church people, and the people that he's talking to are basically church people. One, we think too often, we think highly of ourselves, that we've kind of made it, but we only want to be associated with more people like us. And I think that one of the things that Jesus does, which I think is the revolutionary part of his ministry, is that he's able to do both at once. Tell the people who think they're in that they're not, and remind the people that who they like not liking are actually those that they need to be invitational to. And that double-edged sword of who Jesus is, I think, is a big part of how we understand ourselves. And so when we're looking at this next generation, or we're looking at youth today, or kids today, or parents today, and we're spending time kind of judging that, it's a reminder to me that we've always done that, and that that's not what we're called to do, and that there's a different way of seeing the people around us. One, we should see the people around us with a level of humility, that we are not those who are in the right, but are continually trying to find what is right. And then also that we have a lot to learn and a lot of growth to do in terms of what it is that God is calling us to in terms of how we are invitational. And that we aren't going to be too invitational, because no one that Jesus invites to the table, or no one that Jesus calls anyone in their right mind would have assumed was the people that Jesus would want. And that included his disciples. So all of really his entire time on earth is this one basic core lesson in spend a little bit more time looking in the mirror when it comes to writing something, making something better, and spend a little bit more time looking outward whenever you're trying to find the way towards wholeness. That inclusion is always more whole than exclusion. And I think this passage hits on that as directly as we could possibly ask it to. And that's the way that I think that we need to also look at the youth and younger people in our churches. is that we are not going to be who we can be as a group until and unless we not only we include, but we listen and we engage. And that has to be universal. It can't just be the person on staff who's meant to do that. It has to be all of us. So I don't know exactly where all that goes on Sunday, but those are my first thoughts about this text and what it means for us in this particular time of year. So that's what I have for you today. So thank you for kind of thinking that through with me. Thanks for looking at this text the way that we have. I really appreciate your support as we do these weeks of Vacation Bible School, first with Highland and then at Northmont. Thanks for being you, and I will see you next time for another First Look. Take care.